Good morning. It's time for Rising Q's. This is where we answer your questions. And Robbie normally joins us, obviously, but he's gone. He couldn't make it today for this, so he's got important things to do. He's a very important man, so it's just Ryan and I.
We can plug him. He's taping a podcast for the New York Times, which he bashes relentlessly. But they invited him onto the podcast to make his argument on their podcast called The Argument. Do
we know what the argument is that he's making?
I assume it's something about cancel culture. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to say no government, right?
No, I bet it's cancel culture. But we'll have to check it out and find out.
Yeah, yes. When he comes back, he'll tell us all about it, I'm sure. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to some of these questions. I don't know what these questions are, but here is Paul Baginski. Is that right, do you think? Asking, do you think the war narrative is not going so well, they'll bring back COVID? Oh. Do you think they're going to bring back COVID?
The problem with too much focus on just narratives, like narratives are a thing. Narratives are created by powerful interests, but there's also objective reality underneath the narratives. Russia did invade Ukraine, so it's not a completely fabricated narrative.
It's not a conspiracy theory of some kind, right?
Right. Now, I think part of Putin's strategy is hoping that the West will get bored and move on, and that their attention span will turn away from if it becomes kind of a stalemate, and they're just battling for suburbs, and that I don't think it's going to necessarily go to COVID. I think we are looking at another wave coming in, but I think it'll be similar to the last Omicron wave, where you see these massive spikes in cases, but that the deaths and hospitalizations are pretty low. Though if you're unvaccinated, you still are at risk, even at a young age like myself.
Well, to your point on Putin thinking maybe they'll just get bored and move on. That's a pretty good bet, I would say. For any sort of crisis,
betting on the West having a short attention span is probably
pretty good one. Yeah, pretty good one. But I agree with you. I don't know if COVID, it's hard to say. I thought maybe we'd get over this and people would move on way earlier than we have. So I have not done it. I have not predicted well when it comes to COVID at all. I thought there's no way they'll do mandates and passports. There's no way people will agree to lock down for a couple of years. I just really did not think that. So I don't know. I would hope that come fall, they'll say, no, we're not going to go back into lockdowns. And the one thing that makes me think that might be the case is that in Europe, they're having the big waves right now from this new variant, and they're not locking back down. They're, in fact, opening up more, and they're just saying, well, we just have to live with it. Iceland even said the other day, they said, well, it's time they really kind of said time to go for herd immunity. They pretty much flat out said that. So they're all vaccinated for the most part in Iceland. It's still spreading like crazy. So they're like, the people that aren't getting it again are the ones who already had it. So hopefully it's over. And my guess is the new crisis, unfortunately, that we'll be talking a lot about is the economy. I think that's what we're going to be probably focusing on next. At least we should. Yeah. Because there's, we got problems. So.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in Iceland, the hospitals aren't filling up, unlike Hong Kong, where they're just facing like crisis levels right now because there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy and among the elderly, which is where if you're unvaccinated and you're elderly and you're facing a wave, look out.
Yeah. Okay.
We got next one. Next one is for me from Untried Genius. Untried Genius. Ryan, loves your radar on renewables. Do you all think that the land requirements of solar and wind are a big setback when compared to nuclear? Wouldn't nuclear thrive if it had similar subsidies to renewables? So, the big problem for nuclear right now, everybody gets mad at activists and people who don't like it, but the big problem for nuclear is that private money has zero interest right now in nuclear, and that's despite massive subsidies. Because if you look at, say, South Carolina, they spent $9 billion, and a lot of it was subsidies from ratepayers who now are facing higher electric bills all across South Carolina. And all they got was a hole in the ground in South Carolina, $9 billion. They just couldn't get their act together. Georgia spending billions of dollars on a plant that hasn't gotten anywhere. And so I think there's a plant in Idaho that's been struggling to come online for like years and years and years. So Wall Street basically has said, we're not interested in this anymore because the kilowatt price, is higher than we can get out of wind and solar. Solar because you have, solar because you have rooftop potential that allows it to not take up as much land, but you are going to need significant land for solar farms and for wind farms. I don't know what's your take on any of that.
I mean, I'm not nearly as knowledgeable on this as you are when it comes to, these how we're moving forward when it comes to the energy. I do think we should look a little bit more into nuclear, though. That's where you and I kind of part on that. I do think that the salt nuclear reactors are potentially something that I know China has put online, one or maybe more recently. So I don't know how well that's going, but it would be interesting to look more into that. So.
Yeah, I do think research into it is good, and I think that existing plants, we should keep them running as long as we can safely keep them open. I think Germany maybe moved too fast in shutting down too many. I don't know the safety issues that were involved there. But that is the other problem, that you build this. People think you build a plant and it's basically the upfront cost is the main thing, and then you're going to have permanent, basically free energy. But in fact, after 50 years or so, the thing's falling apart and unsafe, and you've produced all of this waste, which they just simply have not figured out what to do with. And so scaling that up, you wind up having just way too much waste. Anyway,
but I do think we need to get to we need to be energy efficient. I mean, energy independent. For sure, somehow.
Yes.
I mean, I think what we're seeing
sucks.
now. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Last question. Chris Pross asks Kim, if Hillary ran for POTUS on UBI in 2024, like she claims she almost did in 2016, would you vote for her? Okay, so UBI, I've actually become less and less enthralled with. I never was really I wasn't ever an outright supporter of UBI. I always said, I'd like to look more into it. But actually, the more I've looked into UBI, the less I actually think I think it's a Band-Aid to a larger problem. I think we've got a problem coming up in the future. I believe Andrew Yang was absolutely spot on with that we've got an automation, increasing automation, increasing lack of affordability for the middle class. And so padding people, I think, is a good Band-Aid, I suppose. I mean, we saw that during the pandemic. But I don't think it's a long-term solution. I think we have to actually fix the disparity in incomes, and we also have to fix the like housing prices and inflation, basically cost of living. We have to fix that how much things cost for people. So I wouldn't vote for her just because she says, oh, UBI. In fact, I don't know what would cause me to vote for Hillary. That's like a good thought exercise. Like, what could she possibly do besides completely being a different person that would make me vote for her? But also when it comes to UBI, I just think that there's something, I think humans need to be productive. I think a lot of us have a tendency to become lazy. I know I absolutely could be the laziest person on the planet. If I'm not forced to work, I won't work. And I know a lot of people are like that. But I do think that kind of kills us faster. I think we are humans. We need to be productive. We need to feel like we're doing something, building something, making something. Because, there's really no reason to do it when you think about it from like a really philosophical perspective. Like, why are we building all these buildings on the planet? Why are we like hustling around? Like, when you think of us like little ants, it's just kind of, but we do it because, but we do it because it's like in our nature, almost like ants, they do it because it's in their nature. I don't know. Would you? I mean, what about you, Ryan?
Yeah, and I think that UBI got killed by this inflation because you have so many politicians who are blaming people having too much money for inflation. And so I think as a result, like the closest thing we got to a UBI was a universal kind of parent income, the child tax credit, which was extraordinarily popular. But it didn't get renewed. It doesn't seem like it's going to get renewed. Perhaps it'll come back in some form. But a lot of politicians have blamed it and other direct spending, direct checks for inflation. And so as long as they are feeling political pain from inflation, they're going to say, you know what, not worth it then. And so I think that really undercut the politics of UBI.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, and I was one of those that said, oh, come on, giving people some extra money, even more than what they made while they were working their jobs with low wages, isn't gonna do any, like stop, quit saying that it's gonna cause all these problems. But I will say that just anecdotally, the people that I know, a lot of them, when they did receive money from the government, they started to scale back on their own production, on their own work. And even now, a lot of them said, oh, I'm only going to go back to work 3 days a week. I'm not going to work 5 days a week. Those that work kind of gig jobs or restaurant jobs or jobs like that, they cut down quite a bit because they were getting money. So I don't know. So I think the thinking is, well, now if you stop giving them money, then you're going to force them to go back to work. Obviously, that's got its own problems. But I'm curious to see if that does work. I don't know.
I kind of think we work too much as it is. And
I agree. I do think we should adopt more of the European model. But then again, when you look at Europe compared to like Asia, their productivity is not so great. So I don't know.
Well, thank you everybody for your questions, and have a great weekend, and go check out Robbie's podcast, see if we were right about what it was about.
Bye-bye.